Self-esteem matters a hell of a lot more in recovery than most people realize. Because when someone thinks of addiction, they usually think about substances, behaviors, cravings, relapse, or maybe trauma. But beneath much of that is often a brutal relationship with the self, not just pain or regret, but a damaged sense of value. A person can stop using for a while and still secretly believe they are weak, broken, undeserving, or too far gone to build a life they actually enjoy. And that right there becomes dangerous, because if you do not believe you have value, it gets a lot harder to protect your peace, ask for help, tolerate discomfort, or stay committed to recovery when life gets loud. So let's talk about self-esteem, what it actually is, how it impacts addiction and recovery, and 5 ways to start rebuilding it without turning this into cheesy self-help nonsense. Self-esteem is the value we place on ourselves and the confidence we have in our ability to handle life. It is not arrogance, it is not believing you are better than other people, and it is not walking around acting like you are the smartest person in the room. Healthy self-esteem is simply being able to say, I matter too. I have worth too. I am capable of growth. I am allowed to take up space in my own damn life. That matters in recovery because forward momentum depends, at least in part, on whether or not you believe your effort is worth something. If a person sees themselves as powerless in the deepest sense, not just powerless over a substance, but powerless as a human being, they may struggle to believe change is even possible. They may stop trying before they even really begin. Low self-esteem can quietly shape everything. It can affect your thoughts, your emotions, your choices, your relationships, and the way you respond to setbacks. A person with low self-esteem may not trust themselves. They may feel defensive, hopeless, ashamed, or stuck. They may struggle to accept praise, ask for support, or make decisions. They may constantly put other people first while neglecting their own needs. And in recovery, that can become a real problem because recovery asks a lot from a person. It asks you to be honest. It asks you to tolerate discomfort. It asks you to learn. It asks you to fail, reflect, and keep going. It asks you to build boundaries. It asks you to believe that your future deserves protecting. And all of that becomes harder when your internal narrative is, what's the point? I always screw things up anyway. This is also why self-esteem is so connected to shame. Shame tells people they are not just struggling, but that they are the struggle. That they are not just someone who has done harmful things, but that they themselves are harmful, unworthy, or fundamentally damaged. And when shame gets to run the show, addiction often has a lot more room to breathe. A lot of people use because they are trying to cope with life. A lot of people keep using because they are trying to cope with themselves. That's the brutal difference. When someone does not know how to hold their own pain, disappointment, insecurity, or self-judgment, they are more likely to reach for something that offers relief, escape, numbness, confidence, approval, or distraction. So if recovery is going to last, we cannot just talk about stopping the behavior. We also need to talk about the relationship the person has with themselves. And this brings us to one of the biggest myths. The myth is that self-esteem means standing in a mirror and pretending you are incredible when you do not believe it. That is not what we are doing here. Real self-esteem is built through evidence, through action, through repetition, through learning how to treat yourself with enough fairness that your brain can slowly start to believe that you are worth caring for. So here are 5 real ways to begin building self-esteem in recovery. The first is to challenge the way you talk to yourself. Most people with low self-esteem have an inner voice that is absolutely ruthless. They say things to themselves they would never say to another human being. They call themselves pathetic, useless, embarrassing, selfish, weak, stupid, behind, broken. Then they all wonder why they feel defeated all the time. Your self-talk is not harmless. It shapes how you feel, and how you feel impacts how you behave. This does not mean you need to fake positivity. It means you start speaking to yourself in a way that is honest, but not abusive. Instead of saying, I ruin everything, maybe it becomes, I handled that poorly, but I can learn from it. Instead of saying, I'm hopeless, Maybe it becomes, I'm struggling right now, but struggle is not the same thing as failure. That kind of shift matters a lot. The second is to start noticing your strengths, even if it feels awkward. Many people in addiction recovery have spent years focusing on what is wrong with them. Their mistakes are highlighted, their failures are remembered, their good qualities get ignored, minimized, or brushed off like they do not count. But self-esteem grows when you begin recognizing that there is more to you than your worst moments. Maybe you are resilient as hell. Maybe you are loyal. Maybe you are insightful. Maybe you are funny, thoughtful, hardworking, creative, determined, compassionate, or brave. And no, this is not soft nonsense. This is clinically useful. Because when you know your strengths, you are more likely to use them. And when you use them, you create momentum. And momentum is gold in recovery. The third is to let yourself acknowledge accomplishments. This may sound simple, but it is not simple for people with low self-esteem. A lot of people can admit every flaw in the room, but choke on receiving one compliment. They downplay progress. They dismiss effort. They say things like, oh, it's nothing, or I should have been doing this already. No, stop doing that. If you made it through a hard week without giving up, that counts. If you asked for help instead of isolating, that counts. If you set a boundary, attended counseling, showed up to group, got honest, cried instead of numbing, took a walk, ate a meal, apologized properly, or rested instead of self-destructing, that counts. Recovery is built through repeated acts of courage that do not always look dramatic from the outside, but they matter. And when you learn to recognize those moments, your brain starts collecting evidence that you are capable. The fourth is boundaries. A lot of people think boundaries are about controlling other people. They are not. Boundaries are about recognizing that your needs, limits, and emotional safety matter too. Low self-esteem often shows up in relationships as overgiving, people-pleasing, rescuing, tolerating nonsense, or abandoning yourself just to avoid conflict. Then resentment builds, stress increases, and recovery gets shakier. Healthy self-esteem helps a person say, I can care about you without betraying myself. That is huge. Because every time you honor a boundary, you send yourself a message that your well-being has worth. And the more often you do that, the more your sense of self starts to strengthen. The fifth is self-care, but let's define that properly. Self-care is not bubble baths and inspirational quotes. Sometimes self-care is sleep. Sometimes it is saying no. Sometimes it is going to counseling. Or eating food before your nervous system turns into a raccoon in a dumpster. Sometimes it is taking your meds, getting off your phone, going outside, showering, journaling, cleaning your room, or not texting the person who wrecks your peace every second Thursday. Self-care is an investment in yourself. And people do not invest in things they believe are worthless. That is why self-care helps self-esteem. It is not just about feeling good. It is about reinforcing the message that you are worth tending to. There is another piece here that matters in recovery, and that is character. During active addiction, people often lose touch with who they are. Sometimes their identity gets wrapped around the substance, the chaos, the coping, the mask, or the pain. Their character may have been questioned by others, and they may have questioned it themselves. Recovery is not just about removing substances. It is also about rebuilding character with intention. Who do you want to be now? What traits matter to you? What kind of person are you trying to become when no one is clapping? Maybe you want to be more honest, maybe more dependable, maybe more kind, maybe more disciplined, maybe more courageous, more peaceful, more generous, or maybe more emotionally mature. Character is not built by wishing. It is built by practicing behaviors that line up with your values. If you want to become a more trustworthy person, you practice honesty. If you want to become more compassionate, you practice patience. If you want to become more confident, you start doing hard things and surviving them. This is one of the most empowering parts of recovery. You are not stuck with the most wounded version of yourself. You are allowed to evolve. You are allowed to become someone you respect. And that, by the way, is one of the deepest forms of self-esteem. Not inflated confidence, not pretending. Self-respect. The kind that comes from knowing that you are trying. The kind that comes from living more in alignment. The kind that grows when your actions and values stop fighting each other. So if your self-esteem is low right now, that does not mean recovery is doomed. It means this is part of the work. It means you may need to stop measuring your worth by your past. It means you may need to learn how to speak to yourself differently. It means you may need to stop waiting to feel valuable before you start acting like you matter. Self-esteem does not show up first. Sometimes it gets built by the small things you do consistently. You keep your word to yourself. You tell the truth. You ask for help. You set the boundary. You take the walk. You show up again and again. You make one better choice, then another, then another. And over time, your brain starts to catch on. Maybe I'm not who shame said I was. Maybe I'm more capable than I thought. Maybe I do deserve a life that feels better than survival. That is where self-esteem starts to become real, not as an idea, as a lived experience. And in recovery, that can change everything.